NATO came out the right way. I wish they had done more. They should have done more. But this is not a disaster. This is a disappointment, but it provides enough for Ukraine and Ukraine's friends, myself included, to keep working.
Clearly, President Zelensky is not happy with the wording that appears to be on the table from NATO leaders. Can you understand why he's so cross about it?
Of course. He wanted more. He has a right to push for more. By the way, I know Solomia Bobrovska. She's excellent, and I understand her frustration. But take a step back. The big strategic question is whether NATO is prepared to look at Ukraine as future family, details to be worked out, or whether NATO regards Ukraine as a property of Russia, in Russia's sphere of influence. And I think the answer is clear. NATO regards Ukraine as family. Details to be worked out. Now, I'm frustrated that NATO membership isn't happening faster, but there's a line, and NATO made a decision to be on the right side of that line. The wrong side is to say that NATO and Ukraine have no future together. So NATO came out the right way. I wish they had done more. They should have done more. But this is not a disaster. This is a disappointment, but it provides enough for Ukraine and Ukraine's friends, myself included, to keep working.
It's not a good look, though, is it, Daniel, when we consider that up to now there has been so much unity from NATO towards Ukraine, and Ukraine has been so grateful for the military support and equipment and training it's been getting, of course always pushing for more. But do you think that there are dangers here simply in the fact that Ukraine is so clearly frustrated at what's on offer?
Well, let's see what happens at the summit tomorrow. I don't think we're quite done. The NATO communique suggested that there was going to be more in the way of military assistance, and the Biden administration has spoken of doing more to help Ukraine stay secure in the period between now and its eventual NATO accession. So first, let's see what happens. And secondly, I completely share the frustration. At the same time, bringing Ukraine into NATO is a big step. That's a big commitment. So it's one thing to write a speech or an op-ed. I can do that anytime. It's another thing to actually commit to policy on behalf of NATO. So I think this was a step forward. It could have been bigger. It could have been better. But it's a step forward and in the right direction toward Europe whole, free, and at peace that includes Ukraine.
Ukraine itself has acknowledged that it can't become a NATO member while the war is going on, because that would mean that NATO was effectively drawn directly into conflict with Russia.
Exactly.
But President Biden has sounded, and was sounding at the weekend before he set off on his way to the summit, particularly cautious when it comes to the sort of offer that would be made to Ukraine. And it has been reported tonight that it is the United States and Germany that were pressing for the most cautious language. Do you think that's right? I
do. I think the Biden administration has been very cautious. I understand why, but I think I would have advised President Biden to be more forward-leaning in our vision. It's true. Everyone in NATO agrees we shouldn't bring Ukraine in right now while the war is in a hot phase. But if we agree that Ukraine's future is in NATO, let's say so with pride and determination and not hesitate. I think the NATO communique language took a step in the direction of determination. It had a lot of good things in it about this being a war of Russian aggression and not recognizing any of Russia's land grabs against Ukraine. That was good, solid stuff. And we'll see what happens tomorrow with respect to, let's say, the support from NATO countries for Ukraine. So it could have been a better step, but it was still a step in the right direction.
Yeah, President Zelensky is actually meeting Jens Stoltenberg tomorrow, and it's clear that he's going to be absolutely blunt about his desire for a much clearer, much more forthright declaration of support from NATO. It sounds as though you think that he might actually get that we might end up with a stronger form of words.
Well, the NATO communique language is the agreed baseline statement. But let's see what comes out of the Stoltenberg meeting with President Zelensky. I think Stoltenberg is a classy, skilled NATO Secretary General, and I think that Zelensky, who is right to push, will find a way to take what's on offer, say thank you, bless NATO for it, and then prepare to keep pushing, as he should.
And just finally, is there a problem here that if Russia knows there's no question of Ukraine joining NATO until the war is over, that is an incentive for President Putin to just keep fighting for as long as possible?
Now that's an interesting problem. And for that reason, I am glad that NATO's communique didn't actually say that. It didn't say Ukraine can't come in while the war is continuing. It talked about conditions being met and was deliberately vague about what those conditions are. I wouldn't say that a complete end to the war should be a hard and fast condition. You can say, alternatively, that an end to this stage of the fighting would work. You don't want to allow Putin to block Ukraine's membership in NATO by throwing a missile at Ukraine every 2 weeks and saying that the war is still on. So in some cases, ambiguity is your enemy. You want strategic clarity about where we're headed. But as far as tactics go, maybe a little ambiguity could be helpful here.
Daniel Fried, former US Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs. Really good to speak to you. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Do stay with us. You're listening to Carol Walker on Times Radio.